Hi everyone, how's everyone doing here today? Thank you for watching. And today I wanted to talk about something way more serious, which I've talked about before, and that is political violence. And it came in the form of a posting from an associate of mine, somebody that I know, not like a lifelong friend, but acquainted with. And she's very politically active. I'm not going to say her name, more so than I am. She doesn't so much a content creator, but she gets a lot involved in a lot of protests and everything. She has protested against racism and anti-Semitism. She's protested against book banning, and she's no fan of Trump, obviously, because he leans towards fascism. Now, putting Trump aside, or any politicians in general, the one thing she noted, which stayed with me, was that in doing so, and like I said, she does it way more than I do. She's been getting threats on and off. Threats to her, threats to her family. Some of them tried to find out where she works so they could get her fired. And the one other thing is, the threats came from the right, far right extremists, to be specific. Certain hate groups like the Proud Boys, like Moms for Liberty, and other far-right extremist groups. Not Muslims, not people of color, not black people, not BLM, not Antifa, just things from the right. And to me, you gotta ask yourself one thing. Putting all politics aside, who you support. If you've got certain members out there that encourage violence, that do violence things, whether it's groups or a candidate they support, or because that candidate advocates for violence, either in a direct or an indirect way. And let's be clear here, they're not stupid. They know by phrasing things a certain way that there are people that are so far to the right, so extreme, that all they need is a little nudge, and right away they'll commit acts of violence on their behalf, with no regard to the law or to their own safety and well-being. What does that say about the candidate? I really want you to be honest here. I know you're going to immediately jump to conclusions, and and I'm willing to accept the fact that it may happen on the left too, okay? I'm not going to say that the left is immune to violence. And guess what? When they do it, I think it is just as wrong. Those are not the type of candidates I would want to support. And in the past, I voted, Republican and Democrat. It's not like I'm glued into one party. But when you see acts of violence encouraging from a certain individual or individuals, you really got to ask yourself, are those the type of people I want making decisions for the country, regardless of what their role might be, whether it be president, governor, mayor, senator? Is that really who I want running the country? And, not to lead towards certain examples, but January 6th, perfect example. I know I still hear the excuses like, oh, well, he said march peacefully and, protest. Okay, fine. But when violence started happening, several hours transpired before he took any course of action. He could have easily done so. He chose not to. But you guys like to look for an excuse. Oh, well, it was the FBI, it was Antifa. No, it wasn't. It's been debunked. A guy carrying a badge who's supposedly an FBI undercover, because, that's what an FBI undercover agent does, is hold a badge in his hand in plain sight where anyone can see it. And that turned out to be a vape, not a badge. But again, it doesn't matter, because some of them are so entrenched in the cult that, they're willing to stand by him, no matter how much violence he encourages. Saying, you tell me if Joe Biden said, hey, if you see a Trump supporter or somebody wearing a MAGA hat, knock the shit out of him, that wouldn't shock you? That you wouldn't stop and say, well, why would I vote for Joe Biden? And you would have the good right to say so. That would be a good question, to which I would say no. I wouldn't want to accept that from anyone. And I'm not saying every single person on January 6th or every Trump supporter or everyone that votes Republican is violent. I'm really not saying that, because that's clearly not the case. The problem is, and this is where it gets a little complicated for some, and they just don't want to compromise. When you vote for such candidates, when you vote for the candidates that stoke hatred, that stoke bigotry, and that encourage people to be violent, towards certain people on the opposite or marginalized groups, you're essentially a part of that. You're basically looking at it and saying, all right, I'm willing to give it a pass. Trump recently used words from Adolf Hitler describing immigrants or migrants as vermin, okay? And yet now I see a bunch of people on the right either brushing it off or making excuses. Well, then they're a part of that. They're basically looking at it and saying, obviously white supremacists and neo-Nazi groups aren't going to complain. They're going to say, yeah, way to go. But for the rest of you, you know, politicians or voters alike, if you look at that and you turn a blind eye to it, you're basically giving it a pass. You're saying, I'm okay with that, just as long as it's Trump. I'm okay with that, just as long as it's the senator I want, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or Josh Hawley giving a fist bump, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene spewing racist bigotry talk. I'm perfectly fine with that. Well, I'm not a racist. I just voted for him, that's all. Well, you're giving it a pass. You're feeding into that racism. And I know some of you are like, well, I don't like Joe Biden. I'm not asking you to like Joe Biden. But the one thing I'll say this, from what I've seen, Biden does not encourage violence. He doesn't speak out against marginalized groups. Some have argued he might be a racist himself. You know what? I'm willing to subscribe to that and think that's a possibility. But he's at least doing things for the American people, not just specific groups, not just, white people only, not just the rich upper class, but he has had some accomplishments, which is made more than I can see for Trump. All he can do is spiel is World War III, this and that, this and that. Just recently, he tried taking credit for something Biden did, saying, oh, the market was doing good at one point. That's because of me. You haven't been president for a certain number of years, so that's BS. But, once again, to give you a more recent example, in Colorado, after the ruling, you may disagree with that, and I get it, but that was based on a constitutional decision. Well, Trump doesn't care about the Constitution, so by supporting Trump, you're basically saying, I don't care about the Constitution. And no big surprise, all those judges have received a flood of threats. That's what the far right has become. And again, I'm not saying all Republican politicians are like that. I'm not saying all the voters are like that. But if you support those candidates, you're supporting the violence. You're agreeing to that, Maybe you can cherry pick and only select some, but when it comes down to a presidential race, it's going to boil down to a simple decision. One encourages violence and fascism, and the other one doesn't. So which side are you going to be on? Are you going to be patriotic? Are you going to support the Constitution, the rule of law? Guess what? I voted for certain candidates I wasn't crazy about, but at least I knew they were going to do the right thing. Okay? Not every candidate is likable. Not every candidate is going to be to your taste. But if they're the better person for the job, then that's the person I'm going to go with. And I'm not going to support a fascist. I don't encourage political violence. If anything, I speak out against it. Yes, if some guy with a MAGA hat went into a bar and some progressives or liberals jumped him, I would say that is wrong. But some of you on the right won't do that. You'll just look at the violence and just turn a blind eye. You think, if I don't comment on it, or if I just ignore it, or just say, well, make an excuse, then it's okay. No, it's not okay. Because then that's how it's allowed to progress. The thing to do is to call them out on it, and worse, vote against the people that are doing it or encouraging it. That is the key to making America great. That is a patriotic way, not fascism, not political violence. So, anyway, thank you for watching. I really hope you understand, because it's important that you do. Okay?